Welcome to the DL. This is the show where we talk about everything in the truck and equipment repair industry. It's my job to help inform and educate you on ways to help your business. We talk with technicians, business owners, associations, industry experts, manufacturers, and even a few you wouldn't think traditionally apply to your business. Welcome everyone to another episode of the DL. I'm your host, Tyler Robertson, also the CEO and founder of Diesel Laptops. And as you know, if you listen to the podcast show, we talk sometimes about things to do with truck parts, sometimes repairs, sometimes things with your business. But today I have a real expert in the field. I have Mr. Jim Cade. I want to call you James. My first name is James as well. I go by Tyler. But let me introduce Jim Cade with, why don't we tell him what you're doing now? Because you recently retired and started a new venture here. So, Jim, welcome to the show, and let's let everyone get to know you a little bit.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, I late last year, I guess you would call it semi-retired. After a very long career in the industry, managing several large fleets over the years, I decided to retire, but also wanted to keep my hand in. So I started a small consulting company called Asset and Maintenance Insights, and been working through it with the primary purpose of working directly with fleets to help them lower their overall operating cost of their assets and their maintenance, but also working with suppliers that want to serve those fleets to help them tailor their message, have the right offering, and so on, so that be more attractive to fleets and understand what fleets do. So it's kind of both sides of it now. So directly with fleets, and also working with the suppliers to fleets.
So I know you've worked with some big companies before. Can you explain like how many assets these companies had that you were managing the maintenance for?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to start off many years ago, many years ago, as I think about it, as a technician or mechanic, they called them at those days, for Ryder, working in a shop, one of their shops in Des Moines, Iowa, and after a number of moves and time with the company, I was eventually serving as vice president of maintenance for Ryder, which at the time was 180,000 vehicles throughout the U.S., Canada, and the UK as well. So it was a very large fleet, very big job. Had a lot of fun doing it. But since then, I've also managed other fleets. I just recently, as I said, retired from Ruan Transportation here in Des Moines, Iowa, and it's a fleet of about 4,000 power units and 11,000 trailers. So I've had some very large fleets over the years that I've helped manage, and a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error sometimes, but also ultimately came down to a very successful career, I think, as far as helping fleets lower their overall costs.
So I got to ask, how in the heck do you even manage 4,000 mobile assets that are traveling all around the country and breaking down God knows where and trying to get maintenance done in the right times? Like, how do you even begin to like grasp your hands and manage something that big and complex with so many moving pieces?
Having a great team, for one, that was really the basics for it. And you have a structure in place that everybody knows their job, understands the requirements of what we're all trying to do, what we're all trying to accomplish as a team, and manage that. And it was a big undertaking. You're talking about 180,000 vehicles. You've got 6,000 technicians across the country. Across North America, actually, and it was a big job, and it was a very taxing job, but very rewarding job as well.
Well, I can imagine, because trucks don't stop, right? So it's almost a 24/7, 365 type thing where you got to have someone managing that whole process yourself. I can just imagine the time commitment it takes. So we were talking a little bit before we went on the air, and you detailed this out pretty well on your website. But a lot of times people just kind of look at the maintenance side and they don't understand it really starts with the purchasing side to make sure you're buying the right equipment with the right things in it in order to that fit your needs, right? So
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about where it starts in the purchasing decision and some of the components that kind of go involved into like, how do I know what's right for me to buy?
One of the excuse me, one of the several years ago when I was offered the position at Ruan, one of the things that really attracted me to the job was because just exactly what you said. There was a lot of people, and even Ryder was the same way, was they would take maintenance and have it as a separate entity. Purchasing would be a separate entity or whatever. But with Ruan, they approached it a little bit differently. When I was really excited about it was that put it all under one umbrella, one leader. So as vice president of fleet services for Ruan, I had the maintenance, which was a big job unto itself, but also the procurement side, the vehicle specifications, capital expenditures as far as how many trucks, how many vehicles we were going to buy every year, what the replacement cycle was, the warranty, the fuel purchasing. So basically everything that had to do with the vehicle, except for the driver. Everything else was under that fleet services umbrella. And I think we really made some big strides in lowering our costs because we did. We looked at it as a complete package, not just an individual item. Well, let's try to reduce maintenance as much as we can, but at the expense of some other area, which doesn't make sense. So you want to look at it as a whole and not individual pieces.
So I grew up working in a Western Star dealership, and that was kind of great because it was a real niche market, logging trucks, dump trucks, that type of thing. And, price really wasn't the number one concern, there. It was more about durability and reliability and all resale and all those things. And then we bought up the Freightliner dealership when the whole merge thing happened with Daimler Chrysler. But then some of the Freightliner trucks, it was just about price. Like, how cheap can we sell these things? That's all anybody cared about. And, that didn't really work out for me. So I went to work for the Peterbilt dealer. Man, I thought we were doing great when I was at the Freightliner dealer making $3,000 or $4,000 a truck, if we were doing really good. And then I go to the Peterbilt dealer, and these guys are upset if I'm not making, $15,000 gross margin on a truck. So, I think a lot of times, I know as I've been around salespeople forever, a lot of time I think those guys go back to, hey, we just need to be the cheapest, and we're going to go get that deal. But I kind of what I'm hearing you say is, man, that's just one part of it. There's a whole bunch of other variables that need to go into this. And do you think most people that are buying trucks are thinking all that, or is it just a lot of time like, hey, this guy's the cheapest, let's go buy their truck?
I would like to say that most people are looking at the whole package, but again, I think there's still the buyer out there that is looking at the acquisition price and not the total cost of ownership of the vehicle. The acquisition price is just a part of it. You have what it costs to operate the vehicle and maintain it during its life, the fuel that goes with it, the warranty considerations, and then at the end you have what's the residual value. So what can you get back on that vehicle when you're finished with it on the marketplace to sell it for? So what is your residual value? So you take all your costs minus the residual value and divide that by the number of miles or however you look at it, and that's your total cost of ownership for that vehicle. And I don't think a lot of fleets are looking at it like that even today, but I think more and more is that the acquisition price is important. It'll always be important, but to me, it's not the whole answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the whole total cost of operations. Our some diagnostic tools, we're not the cheapest. We're actually the most expensive ones out there to go buy these things. But we go back to here's all the value we can do for you. And that's what it comes down to is here's how much time and money you can save using our product versus our competitors.
Sure.
So what you're talking about sounds like some pretty complex things, right? Because you have to spec the truck right. What warranties do I buy? What extended warranties do I buy? Are they from the factory? Who's going to do my repairs when they break down? What maintenance intervals do I need? What are the parts? I mean, there's a lot of variables in there. So
Sure.
If someone's a small fleet and they're listening to this, how do they even begin to kind of start to figure out where they should go or what questions they should be asking when they're out trying to negotiate truck deals?
First one I think is most important is how is the vehicle going to be used? What application is it going to go into? Is it a high mileage over the road vehicle, or is it a local delivery or regional application? Because that has impact on the not only the transmission maybe, but also the gear ratio or the horsepower that's going to be required of that vehicle. And again, keeping your eye towards the end game, which is what's the residual value of that vehicle. That's something that always made sure is that we were looking at in the end is that you got to operate this vehicle and you have to understand what it's going to be used for. But at the end of the day, you want to maximize your residual value as well. So it's a balancing act, always understanding that. But again, I think the most important thing in the beginning is understanding the application of the vehicle.
So in your experience, you've been around fleets for a long time. Have you seen fleets change their perception or change their buying strategy? I mean, are they holding them longer than they used to? Are they leasing them instead of buying them? Have things evolved? And is that an evolving industry? Or is it kind of, hey, they've been doing this the same way for the last 10 years. We're going to, flip trucks every 4 years and buy warranty? Or what's happening in the greater fleet purchasing area right now?
That's a very interesting question because over the last several years, the trend has been for a lot of mega fleets is that, especially high mileage ones that operate, tandem axle sleeper type vehicles, is that they wanted to trade vehicles every 3 to 4 years. Buy a truck, operate it for 3 years, about the time the warranty runs out, and then trade it in and get a new vehicle back. And then you've seen the other side of the spectrum, and you've seen other fleets, maybe more regional fleets, that have extended the term of vehicles. So, instead of 3 or 4 years, many fleets are running 5, especially regional fleets, are running 5 to 7 years before pulling vehicles out. The challenge with that is that, one of the, I go back to that model I talked about earlier, the total cost of ownership. When you look at today, what a vehicle costs, just say you're buying a new vehicle and it's $150,000 today. You go back 5, 6, 7 years, that vehicle, you could buy that vehicle for $90,000 to $100,000. The problem is the residuals haven't changed. So you can buy $100,000 vehicles 5, 6 years ago and expect to see $28,000 to $30,000 on the back end with that vehicle. Today, you're going out and buying a $150,000 vehicle, and you're still getting that $28,000 to $30,000. So your overall total cost of ownership is up substantially. So it's something I think a lot of fleets are looking at right now and are trying to understand, because again, one of the emissions changes that are happened are going to continue to happen. 2024 is going to be a big one for the industry, and I expect to see the cost of a new vehicle to jump up again, mainly because of the new equipment that's going to be needed to meet those new emission levels. So I think if I had to guess and make an educated guess on where I think it's going to go, I think you're going to see hold times for vehicles extend out even further, just because of the cost, and they have to look at the return on the investment.
Yeah, I know my father, he owns a concrete company, a ready mix operation. They buy gravel trucks and that type of thing too. But just seeing how a new mixer truck now costs $250,000 is just insane what I was used to when I was a kid here and what my dad had to spend on trucks.
Absolutely.
And I sold trucks for a while, and it was, you were pushing $120,000 to go buy like a fully loaded sleeper truck going over the road. Now the price is substantially more. It's like you said, a 5-year-old truck, the price hasn't changed much from 5 years ago, so they're just depreciating faster. And I know emissions drove a lot of this, but we also got technology coming into play here, right? Because now you got more computers on them, they're more complex, emission systems. How are fleets figuring this out? Because it's really complicated thing. I mean, dealers hardly get the right training they need in order to fix things efficiently, and it's going so fast right now. So how do fleets keep up with today's trends and technology changing when it comes down to the maintenance and the repair on these things?
It's very, very difficult. It's a very big challenge for fleets. I think one way of doing that is more standardization with fleets, as far as, it used to be Go back several years, my days with Ryder, just the business that we were in, you would pick and choose several different suppliers. You'd have some Freightliners, some Kenworths, Peterbilt, some Volvos in there or whatever. And it was just mainly just to have a mix of different vehicles and part of the customer attraction and that type of thing. Also some cost savings as far as who give you the best deal. But today, I think with most fleets, is they're looking at standardizing as much as they can with individual manufacturers. At Ruan, went after a lot of back and forth, finally ended up standardizing on a Freightliner model truck, primarily because of the package that was involved as far as the acquisition, but also the support after that. And again, training was a big piece of that. Between Freightliner and Truck Country, the dealer did a great job in meeting our training needs. But even with that, it's still a challenge. It's still getting people motivated, as well as providing the training as well, to get people to understand that trucks are changing. I had a kind of hit me several years ago. I was in a meeting. We were talking about training, and the gentleman who was with us kind of hit me square between the eyes, because he made a comment that I hadn't thought about before. And he asked me the question. He says, "When you were a technician," he says, how did you troubleshoot a windshield wiper problem on a truck?" And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, "Well, I get out my troubleshooting voltmeter, ohm meter, whatever, and start tracing down the electrical side of it, or if it was an air pressure system, checking that side of it out." And he looked at me for a minute after I answered him, and he says, "You know how you do it today? You take your diagnostic tool and you plug into the vehicle and you operate the windshields and see what's happening." And to me, that was a epiphany, I guess, or whatever, is that things had changed substantially, and fleets have to adapt to that, and it's still continuing to change. The challenge, I think, with where we are, is that if you look back 5 years and seeing the tremendous amounts of change that we've seen, it's not slowing down. In fact, it's probably accelerating into the future.
Yeah, it's truly amazing too. I remember being a service manager, and if we had 3 ECMs on a truck, we thought it was complex, right? We had an engine, an ABS, and maybe a cab controller. And today, when you see these new Volvos and they got 15 or plus ECUs, and now they're putting mini ECUs into the individual components that require resets and program. I mean, it's getting complex really quick. And I can think when I was a service manager, and this is 15 years ago, man, we did a lot of transmission work, rear end work, rebuilding these things, clutches.
Yeah.
That work's kind of going away because technology's gotten better. The components don't fail as often. Plus, I don't even know what percent are manual transmissions anymore versus automated and automatic. But it's a changing industry, and I think people that run repair shops don't realize those clutch jobs aren't going to be there forever. Like that, stuff like that, and brake jobs, disc brakes come in, electrification, all these things. You've been on the side of it with the bigger mega fleets, especially. Do you see the purchasing trends changing? Is it more automated transmissions? Are they talking about electric trucks? Like, what do you see kind of the conversation going to when you talk to people?
Well, last time I checked with, strong relationship with Freightliner for a number of years. And I believe the last time I checked with them, their assembly line, they were up to 60% of automated transmissions in every new truck they built. So yes, it's going that way, with many systems on the vehicles today. With the emissions changes coming in 2024, I'm sure we'll see another ratchet up of the complexity in the vehicles and the emissions and the engines. But also, on the vehicle side, it's communications and data that has been made possible by all this electrification of the vehicles and the automation of it. There's a tremendous amount of data that's going to be available off these trucks, or is now. that will continue to increase over the years. So it's a challenge. And then you look forward to where even farther than that is, a little bit farther down the road, electric trucks, pure electric powered trucks are coming. There have been a lot of fleets are testing them today. Ruan's involved in some testing. It's coming. If you look at the tremendous amounts of investment that is being made by the OEMs, the number of startup companies. It's every day I pick up a magazine or something else, you see where a new startup is out there pitching its idea around electric trucks. So I truly believe that electric trucks are very much in our future, and we're going to have to adapt to that as it comes along as well.
So I don't know the exact stat, but I remember reading this about Tesla, and they basically had said, in 50 years, no American car company has ever started back up in the United States, right? And all of a sudden, since Tesla, you could probably name a dozen startups, and they're not attracting millions in investments, they're attracting billions in investments. And I think most people need to get that through their head. Like, these things are coming whether you want them to or not, because the market's demanding them that are coming. Yep. So knowing they're coming here, and people are always like, well, how long? Is this next year, 5 years, 10 years? Like, you know what? None of us know. It's probably going to happen faster than they think it is, but it's still going to take some time. So if you're a fleet owner right now in charge of maintenance, or you're a small business owner that has a repair shop, what skill sets would you be saying, hey, we really need to be keeping an eye on this, or start investing some time and money in these knowledge areas to really deal with what's coming down in the future here? What advice would you give people that are listening to this?
Well, first, I think I truly believe that we're going to look back on 2021 in a few years from now and say that was the beginning, that was the dawn of the electric truck age, because I think you're going to see a lot of electric trucks start hitting the market this year. But one of the things with that is that that concerns me, and I know some of my peers that I've talked to over the last year or so about this, is that one of the weakest skills technicians, whether they're in a fleet shop or a independent shop or a dealership, one of the weakest skills is electricity. So how are we going to solve that problem going forward? And I think focus on basic electrical skills in the interim here while we're ramping up is going to be very important, because again, it's going to get, from what I've seen and involved, I've been part of the Daimler Vehicle Electric Council for the last couple of years, getting input from them, as well as them talking to us about what the fleet needs are. And so from some of the things that I've seen is it's going to take another level of skill and effort to be able to diagnose the electric trucks. Again, I think one of the things we hear, and it still would be unproven, but the assumption is that electric trucks will take less maintenance, but when they do need the maintenance, it's going to be intensive as far as electric motors, batteries, cabling, and you're looking at the voltage that's going to be on these vehicles. It's going to require new skills and new ways of doing things. So again, I just think the focus on basic electricity right now needs to be paramount in everybody's mind that's going to be operating electric vehicles.
Yeah, that's great of you to say, because it's the same thing we've been preaching to people too, is, hey, these things are coming, but even if they don't, or you think it's 10 years, you still need to get really good in electrical, because we have ADAS systems, we got driverless trucks we're not even talking about yet, there's more computers on trucks. These are sophisticated computers driving down the road holding 80,000 pounds. You need to get really good on properly diagnosing them. The days of the parts cannon are gone. These are no longer $100 parts. These are $1,000 parts that you guys are just throwing on these things, and you're throwing money away at the end of the day. So we have our hands-on training classes we do, and tell me if this surprises you or not. So we have every student comes in. We called it Basic Electrical was the first iteration, and we have them do a pre-test. And a lot of the guys you get in are like, man, I've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years. I know what I'm doing. We have them take the pre-test. Would you guess what % of them can actually pass a pre-test for basic electrical?
Probably 30%.
You were really close. 20% pass, 80% fail, right? Yeah. So you're there. You're in this every day. You know it. We had to relabel the course like Electrical 1 instead of Basic Electrical, just from the ego perspective of the whole thing. But you're right. It's really bad out there. But I don't blame the technicians, because they don't have access to the training classes or the repair information or the wiring diagrams. And that's, obviously what we do at Diesel is try to give people access to those things. So I can totally see how we got in the situation. It's going to put a real pinch, I think, on some business owners eventually when they're out there trying to figure out these things. But let's shift gears a little bit. Again, let's just play a little scenario out. Say you're at a 100 truck fleet. You're in charge of the maintenance. You kind of walk into just a pure disaster. There's no real tracking of anything. Everyone's just fixing things as they break. Where would you start? What would be the first couple of things you'd say, man, we really got to go lock down and really dig into this and start righting the ship here, because we're just throwing money away that we don't even realize?
Very good question. Lots of areas to concentrate on. One of the things that I always, over the last several years, whenever I walked into a new fleet or whatever, is understand where you are today, as far as where are you spending your money, or your repair frequencies, or whatever you want to look at. And I always started off by building a baseline. I said, okay, we need to have something to tell us, are we getting better or are we getting worse? Or is it, instead of just looking out there and say, yeah, I think it's better, you need a true ability to monitor and measure yourself and your organization, and also to prove to others that you're having an impact. So developing KPIs, key performance indicators, around the areas where you're going to have the biggest, if you improve this, it will have the biggest impact on your overall business. And I typically jointly developed 10 major KPIs that for my organization, that says that if we am focused as an organization on these 10 areas, that we improved, and we set guidelines or objectives for, and if we improved, the overall business would be much improved. And so starting with a baseline, understanding where you are, setting KPIs, communicating those to the entire organization. This is what we're trying to do. So once you have that in place, typically you're going to have your KPIs are going to be around, the pretty much standard things of labor productivity. How are you measuring your productivity? Are you accomplishing things, or are you wasting a lot of time and effort? So labor productivity is key there. Parts costs, it's kind of, that one gets down a little fuzzy sometimes, because it's hard to measure whether you're doing a good job or bad job. But again, having some sort of baseline or trend anyway on how your parts costs are going. Warranty is always a big one. I think a lot of fleets miss out on warranty. The thing that I always looked about warranty is, whether you like it or not, or understand it or not, is that when you buy a new vehicle, whether it be a car, it be that $250,000 concrete mixer you were talking about, that in the price of that vehicle, there's warranty dollars in there. You've already prepaid the warranty dollars. And as a fleet manager or someone responsible for managing a fleet, you have to understand that and make sure that you are going after those dollars when needed and legitimately, and making sure you're doing the right things, but going after that money for expenses that you've had that should be covered under that warranty. A lot of times I've seen fleets just ignore that, thinking it's too much time, too much effort, or whatever, and they're leaving hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on the table. So they're basically repairing or paying for the repair twice. So warranty management is very critical. Preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance for me is the key of any maintenance program for any fleet. Anytime or any organization, anytime you're operating equipment, whether you got a plant or you got a bunch of trucks, preventive maintenance is key to controlling your costs. It's been proven time and time again that it is much better to create a preventive maintenance program and follow through on and do your inspections. And I think I always look at it from the point of a preventive maintenance being there's two objectives of a preventive maintenance program. One is to find problems while they're small, so you can repair them at a low expense instead of waiting for them either to become a major failure or fail, even worse, fail away from your shop where you're paying substantially higher cost to have it repaired. Plus the inconvenience of the vehicle, the driver, and a missed load. The other piece is that's very critical, I think, is from a preventive maintenance program is making sure the vehicle is safe to operate. Without that, you're leaving your company exposed in this days of what they call the nuclear verdicts against trucking companies. You've got to protect yourself, and having a strong preventive maintenance program that is looking at ensuring the safe operation of that vehicle is absolutely critical. So those are the two big things I look at on preventive maintenance. And back on parts, one of the things I always see around parts is for a lot of fleets is they look at an inventory on site as being a necessary evil, and they want to try and keep it as low as possible. For me, it should just be the opposite. You ought to have the parts you need on hand so you can keep your truck or your vehicle, whatever it is, out on the road. Because today, especially in today's environment, fleets, any organization, vehicle doesn't make money while it's sitting in the shop waiting on a part. Doesn't help anybody if that truck is sitting somewhere waiting for a part to show up and it takes 2 to 3 days. If I have that part on hand and have it available, then I can keep my truck out and running and more than pay for any minor inventory costs I might have on that vehicle. So I always told my operations, I don't care if you have $1 million in your parts inventory, as long as you're turning it. Yeah. So turning parts inventory is very, very critical. So those are the key things that I'd look at is labor productivity, preventive maintenance, warranty, parts usage, parts inventory, and overall safe operation of the shop to make sure that you're sending people home the same way they came to work at.
So when I used to work at a dealership, we had all these 20 groups, right? You get 20 dealers in there, and we all kind of share numbers, and we talk about things, and, oh, what are you doing? Why is yours so bad? Why is yours so good? And you learn a lot. Does that kind of stuff happen in the truck fleet worlds for the maintenance side, or is that nothing that really happens that much?
It's a bit of a challenge. There's been some efforts around that to share information between. There's a couple of organizations. The ATRI, the American Trucking Research Institute, does an annual survey and publishes it, I think, in October, November of every year for the previous year. And FleetNet is a company that's doing some work around that, working with the American Trucking Association and the TMC on trying to look at the cost of breakdowns, more of anything, not so much on the actual operation of vehicles. But yeah, there's not a lot of benchmarking that goes on between fleets. Part of the challenge with that is that there isn't a true standard to what is maintenance and what isn't maintenance. I've been with many or several companies, and over the years, everybody had a little different way of looking at it. Does facility overheads go into maintenance, or is that going to somewhere else? Does uniforms, is that a maintenance expense, or is it something else? So it's, again, what's in and what's out is the biggest part.
Yeah. So
standardizing cost is very critical. I think probably the closest I've seen much activity around that is it's a little not specifically on maintenance, but looking at operating ratios for trucking companies, which is maintenance and equipment expense is part of that. So having a good operating ratio is something that most people will publish, and you see that information. but it's a good way to compare overall companies from that. But again, it's getting down to the specifics, not a lot.
Well, I just want to say I really appreciate you coming on here. If people took away anything from this, I think they took away Jim really knows his stuff when it comes to the maintenance side of this. You've been doing it for a long time. And now I know you're retired, but you're still working here. You got your own business you've established now. How do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to find Jim Cade if they're out there trying to locate you?
Well, I put the website for Asset Maintenance Insights. It's a very simple name. It's www.fleetami.com. AMI is Asset and Maintenance Insights. The contact information on that website is how to get a hold of me. It gives you an overview of what I do or what I'm trying to do. And again, it has an email and my phone number in the contact information.
Well, hey, and I appreciate you being active on LinkedIn. I see you sharing articles and talking about stuff all over the place. You know, it's funny because I hear about billions being invested in freight matching and load matching and all these ways for companies to make more money. And I'm like, there's a lot of ways to make more money in your fleet. You just got to reduce some costs and be a little smarter about some things over here. So they really work well together. So thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I think it was a great episode. I think our listeners really took a lot away from it. So with that end, as we close it all up, just remember, everybody, it's not just diagnostics. It's diagnostics done right. And that goes for the fleet managers out there as well. The industry's changing. It's evolving. Just keep your ears open and eyes on the screen, and you'll be surprised what you learn out there. So thank you very much for this episode.
Thanks, Doug.